Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 148. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Heracles. We've got a lot of little details to look at. I've been very busy trying to get things moving in a forward direction and having some success, which is very nice. After the last episode I continued on the back end of the ship. I really wanted to get it buttoned up and mostly done, to the point where I didn't feel like there was anything structurally necessary. Although I will say up front that there's going to be some texturing and painting going on the back end before it's all said and done. I don't feel like I have to add anything else structurally because of all the work that I did since the last episode. Now, the last episode we were kind of focused a little bit on this central area here. We added these thrusters and then we added this little sort of hemisphere, the half globe block, just for visual interest. But we had all of this other stuff that I wanted to take care of, and one of the other things that we had was the big flat section on the back end of the ship, and then if you continue going in a sort of a forward direction, it would have another flat section. So we had like this flat section. If we could cut it off right here like this all the way down, and that used to be the back end of the ship, and then since then we've added all of this stuff, all of these details in order to fill that in. But then if you go from that sort of line back, we would have another flat section here. So there was a lot of filling in of those sections as well. You can see here we've got a big sort of hump on the back end, and it continues all the way around. It's not necessarily following the same pattern all the way around, but just the filling in and making sure that we've got something happening structurally on this back end aside from just a bunch of flat things. And I think I was successful in making that happen. One of the details that I incorporated was duplicating what we did on the front of the thrusters previously, where we have the little 45-degree slope block and then the 22.5-degree point, the compound angle, and we've got it here, and then we've got it here, and it comes around here, and then wherever we had a inner corner or an interior corner, however you want to describe it, I put in one of the inner corner blocks just to kind of help with the transition a bit. And then we go back to the point in this area here. We've got one block space between two thrusters, so we can't obviously do this specific design for each thruster, so I just went with the same profile up here and used the blocks that would allow us to have that profile on both sides. These sort of strange indentations, there's only two of them. There's the one here and the one here. They aren't duplicated anywhere else. I don't even remember exactly what I was thinking when I put them into place, but I kind of liked them, so I left them. If I hadn't left them, if I had done something else, it would have been just duplicating this thing all the way around as we do. Once all that was done, I was still left with a couple of flat sections. This is a flat section. I don't really expect necessarily that I'll do anything with this. I might, but I'm probably just going to leave it. It's not big enough to be that much of a concern. But this area back here, it was just all the way around here. It was just one big flat section. So I put in these little structures with the thrusters sticking out just in order to fill that in and add a little bit of visual interest. And I found that I was really happy with it when it was done, because now when we look at it on the back end, it doesn't look flat and boring anymore. It looks like there's quite a bit going on, but none of it is confusing. You can look at it and it basically all makes sense to some degree. So that was kind of a victory that I was pretty happy about. Then it was time to finish off these thruster clusters, bringing the structure out a little bit to cover the back ends a little bit. It used to be cut off right here, and all of this stuff are things that I've added just recently, and tried to make sure that we're kind of keeping things symmetrical across the center line. For all of these clusters, there's a center line. For this one, it's right here. So this half here and this half here are mirror images of one another. Up here, we have basically the same thing, only the dividing line is at a 45-degree angle, and they're mirror images. So keeping that in mind, it actually makes the design process much easier, because then we have to design one side and then duplicate down here, and they're close enough that you can duplicate them very easily just by looking at them and making everything kind of go together the way that you want it to. You can see I missed a bit of texture there, but we can sort that out later. Not a ton of detail on this side. I wanted to keep it fairly simple because we've got all this stuff going on down here. We may again add a little something in here just because, but not necessarily something that I feel is necessary. It would just be kind of gilding the lily. The one difficulty that I would have is that I don't even know if we could do this right in the middle. It's kind of hard to say. Possibly that if that was the middle block, that it would be pretty straightforward to do something, but I'm not too worried about it right now. If we come up here, we can look at the front of these thruster assemblies. This sort of mess that we've got here, I had this idea, and I knew that the idea came from somewhere that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't my idea, but I couldn't remember what it was until just very recently, when it kind of fell into place. A lot of World War II fighters had flaps just behind the engine cowl that they could open up to control the amount of air that was going past the engine in order to cool it. And that's where I got this idea for these things that look like sort of flaps sticking out the side of what would otherwise be a fairly smooth kind of thruster assembly like these guys here. But up here it looks much more aggressive, and it's not necessarily the kind of thing that I'm looking at thinking, wow, I'm so glad I did it that way, it's the best thing I've ever done. But it is looking like something that I can live with and something that I can be happy with. So it's a success in that regard. But again, this is one of those areas it's definitely going to need some paint and possibly some texture before we can say that it's done. And there's lots of opportunities to experiment with different kinds of color schemes and things that we might want to do with that guy. And so that whole concept is duplicated around the cowlings, or cowls, I guess, depending on how you want to describe it, for all of these guys, all the way around the entire ship. Although these guys are a little bit farther back, I just realized. Hopefully the other guys are a little bit farther back as well, so I don't have to do a whole lot. Yeah, these guys on the back end, on the lower section, are a little bit farther back relative to the guys up top, so I'm okay with that. It's a success, like I say. Paint and texture, and then this thing will probably be done. Pretty happy with it. I've done a certain amount of additional texturing, going for the shiny bit, just kind of getting it all consistent all the way around, but we've still got a lot to do. The one thing that I neglected to show you guys in the last episode, these landing gear pods that I put all the way around the ship. There's 4 on this side. You can see there's 1, there's another, 3 and 4, and then I think I put 4 over on this side as well. There's 1, another, 3 and 4. They're all the exact same design. There's nothing different about them from one to the next. And I just felt like they did a better job of sort of conveying the idea that these are big beefy structures that are intended to hold something that's extremely heavy, as opposed to just having these little landing gears tacked to the bottom of the ship. And all of these gears are recessed too. So, I mean, they don't actually move. They look like they should kind of recess. You know, they'd have like a little bit of a plunger action or a suspension, like a shock absorber action going in. They don't, of course. But they look like they could do that. But mostly they just kind of seem a little bit out of place in this kind of assembly if they were 2 blocks high. We're coming down to like here. So we pushed them up a little bit, and I'm pretty happy with them. I haven't actually set it down on them yet because I still have to put the extra plates on the bottom of the ship. I'll do that eventually, but I'm pretty satisfied that it's an upgrade over what we had before. So we're going to roll with it. And I'm saving the best for last, not because it's the best necessarily, but because it's the most different compared to anything that we've been doing with the build up to this point. Now, I mentioned in the last episode and probably several other episodes before that, the whole idea that I wanted to go around and just add as much detail as I could to the outside of the ship, just to make it look like something interesting was going on. You wouldn't find a lot of flat things that don't look like they're doing anything without necessarily having to have everything make sense. That's the key. We can experiment and have things not necessarily make sense, once everything's all said and done, if I want to change it, I can change it. If I release it with the blueprint and other people see it and they want to change it, they can change it too. So it's not like something that's going to ruin the build if it doesn't look good at all. But in terms of experimenting and doing something different and learning new things about how things go together, it's been kind of fun so far. And as you've seen, there's plenty of room for me to continue experimenting. We're going to start at the front and work our way back. We've got this sort of hard point for the guns. These are cannons, the capital vessel variant of the cannon turret. And this is sort of my go-to design lately whenever I'm doing guns, whether it's sitting flat like the way they are now, or having like a vertical plate and the guns attached to either side. It's just allowing to have overlapping fields of fire a little bit more easily, so that each of these guns can reach a target in the most broad area that we can arrange for that particular gun. And in this case, you can see, because it sticks out from the front a little bit, if we put ourselves right where the gun is and we kind of point this way, we can start from this side and we can go all the way around, and then there's the side of the ship, so we can basically shoot down the side of the ship as well. That's not bad. That's like a 270-degree field of fire for both of these guns. And then because we've got this situation where they're one on top of the other, the turret depression, or the barrel depression, how far down it can go between the two of them, means that we can probably hit a target that's fairly close to the ship, even if it's right dead center in the middle between the two guns. Anything else, because the turrets can aim up quite a ways, we probably have pretty good coverage, and we don't have to worry too much about there being blind spots or dead spots where we can see the target, but our turrets can't reach it. So that's sort of the goal goal of having these set up the way that they are. And whenever you see guns set up that way throughout the rest of the build, now you'll know why it's done that way. And then, just for the sake of the cosmetic factor, going with that black and green theme, these are the wall blocks that I've used in the past. And they're kind of interesting for layering onto flat surfaces, because it gives you a little bit of structural texture as opposed to just the painted on textures. And in this case, it allows us to have a black face and then these green edges for just sort of contrast or highlight or whatever you want in this sort of situation. And the applications for this kind of thing are pretty much endless. Anywhere you've got something that's just a little bit dull and you want something that's not necessarily significant to add visual interest to it, this is one way of doing that, by tacking on these pieces to the hull and then painting them with some contrast or some changes in color. Now we've got the Big Brother sort of situation. We've got this one is the skinny little flat blocks, and then these ones are a little bit thicker. These are the half blocks that we can place, and again, painting black and green just to go with the color scheme. We've got it on the interior. We've got some weird stuff going on in the corners where they come together, and this is entirely cosmetic. There's absolutely no real functional purpose to having this here. It doesn't add significantly to the armor value of the ship. We've got plenty of armor in behind it anyways, but it's just there to add a little bit of texture, 3D kind of texture, and some color that you wouldn't normally be able to do if you're just, you know, painting on the textures with the texture tool. This may or may not stay where it is. It may or may not grow or shrink. I'm not sure, but it was a good opportunity to just kind of mess around with it and see. And I would say that definitely it has an application. And again, similar to this, you find a spot where you want something to be happening, but you're not entirely sure what. You know it doesn't have to be functional, and you can't even think of something functional to have happening in that spot. You can put something like this, and it just makes things a little bit easier to fill in without having to drive yourself insane. But then we get to things that are a little bit more involved looking without necessarily being more involved. I started looking at some of the decorative blocks that we have access to. This is the capacitor decorative block. It has no functional purpose, but it looks neat. And it's got this sort of copper color, and then a color that you can paint. In this case, I painted it black. I think it might actually be blue the default color before you paint it. And then down here we've got these. You can actually store things in these. Power storage deco, which means decorative. That's what it's supposed to mean. I've never... Look, wait, let's try. Can we put that in there? Yes. We can put all kinds of different things in our power storage deco blocks on the exterior of the ship. You can hide extra weapons, food, if you're not worried about it spoiling, whatever you want. I just find it a little bit funny that you could store things in here. And then this guy attached to this guy with one of these 90-degree cylinder bits on here, and another one of those hemisphere half globe sort of pieces, and this one's textured with the vent texture, this texture here, and then all of the cylinder blocks, the 90 degrees, the straight ones and the T-shaped ones are textured with this texture here. It's just basically the metal with the lines, and then it's got some bolts or screws, rivets, whatever, around the perimeter. That's what I used here, and then I just painted them the medium brown sort of color, and that's what we ended up with. So we have 4 of these, and again, I may keep them all here, I may remove some of them, I may remove all of them, but if I remove them, and even if I don't remove them, they'll probably also be showing up somewhere else on the ship as well, because they're just kind of neat to look at. They won't necessarily be in the same configuration, but I just like the way that they come together and add a little bit of visual interest. Down here is an example of using very, very basic blocks to make something that doesn't do anything but looks like it does. We've got the combat steel, very simple structure, built all the way around, and then we've got some truss blocks. You can see them inside. They're painted green, and then we've got the shuttered windows over the front of them so that they look like some sort of great big vent sticking out the side of the ship, more so than that. Little vent, big vent. You can make this any size you want it, really. You can put them wherever you want them, and you never have to come up with an excuse to explain why you've got vents on the outside of a starship. I've found it's just one of those things. They're there, and who knows? How can you tell me that there's no need to have a vent there when you don't even make starships in real life? So let's not dick around with it. I'm happy with the vent here. We've got this radar dish that will turn around when the ship is powered. It kind of spins around, and it's sitting on a little platform that's textured, and I decided not to paint it black. I decided to leave it gray just because, but the border around it that I added obviously is painted black, and it's got the green, and the reason is because I originally did not have this border around this section here, and I found that it was missing something with just that guy kind of sitting there. So I put it around, and all of a sudden it wasn't missing something anymore. So something that I keep in mind as I go through this, that having borders, this is another example of it, this really thin strip all the way down, and this one all the way across here, another example of looking at the whole picture and saying it's missing something, and just by adding this little strip made a huge difference in terms of the overall appearance. Down here we've got more of these cylinder blocks made to look like piping on the outside of the ship for whatever reason, and then we've got some textured wall blocks. Again, you can see we've got the green on the edge, and then black and dark gray and different textures, just to kind of make things stand out a little bit with the contrast. I found like these 2 blocks here, when they were painted black, you really lost a lot of the detail in the texture, so by backing it off to a dark gray, you're able to see a lot more clearly what the details are. And then over here, same thing. These middle blocks really benefited from a dark gray texture as opposed to the black, so that you can see some of the things that are going on. And it looks kind of like pipes in behind these retaining sort of pieces in the X sort of shape with that guy there, and the plus shape. There's a lot of retaining pieces in this thing, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It looks like pipes passing through, which makes sense because then we've got the big pipes here. What are all these pipes carrying? I have no idea, but you can see some of them in space. And then we've got the beginnings of something up here. These are another storage block. These are the medium box. You can store 7 things in each of them, and then I've got these little wedges beside them that sort of, basically they're following the profile of this back edge to some extent. I really feel like it needs a little bit more. Each of these groupings needs sort of something going on in this area here, but I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and figure out exactly what that would be. Up here we've got yet more of the cylinder blocks. You can see I have to paint. I keep forgetting that these T blocks, they have two sides to them, whereas the other blocks only have one side. You just squirt them once with the paint gun and the whole thing is done. And then we've got these tanks, more decorative blocks that can also store things. I don't know, that one's 9 blocks you can store in this tank, and another cluster of them over here. And again, when we kind of take a look from back here, oh, we got too far away, you don't necessarily know exactly what everything is. You just know that you're kind of curious about it. You want to know what's going on. You can see the little green highlights in various different places without it necessarily being this incredibly glaring green in your face. The black and the gray, I think, is working. The black isn't overbearing. Sometimes black can be pretty overbearing, but in this case, the gray helps break it up a little bit so that it's still, it doesn't look like an evil ship. It's just a ship with alien green markings all over it. And then the last thing, the last little detail that I added is this sort of thing here. More of the venting variety. And this, again, was just a structural element. Very, very simple. Combat steel all the way around. Very common blocks that we use all the time. A little bit of texturing on the inside. You can see we've got the lined bits here, and then we've got the vents. All of these are painted black, and you can see what I mean when I talk about taking a texture. You can see that it's textured, but not very clearly, because the black kind of knocks off a lot of the highlights that make it a little bit difficult to see, and I was okay with that in this situation, and down here as well. Even with the black, you can still see enough of it to kind of get a feel for what's going on. And then back here, you can see the green. Up here, you can't. From the side, you can see the vents and how everything's playing together. And it fits. It fits with what's going on here. It's kind of, we could, if we want to, probably follow the contour a little bit up in this direction. Just keep adding and building it out this way. I may still look at doing that. I may not. We'll see how it goes. But that's kind of a glimpse at the thought process that's going on in the back of my mind when I'm doing this detailing kind of stuff, is just putting stuff on the outside of the ship that looks interesting and makes at least some sense, even if it's not functional, so that you've got that curiosity when you look at the ship. You're not just like, ho hum, another bland hull design. There's something going on that you really want to investigate, at least for a little while. So I'm going to continue with the detailing and the texturing, and the occasional additions, structural, functional things that still haven't been incorporated into the ship. And sooner or later, it's going to be done. And then when it's done, there's going to be a blueprint. And when there's a blueprint, you can have this ship too. If you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.